Bridgeport, Connecticut. It's One with Everything. Tonight's guests, Jovina Chan, Daryl Davis. Science segment with Dave Vago. Musical guest, Krishna. Music by Matt Oestreicher and the One with Everything Orchestra. And now, a big round of applause for your host, Jonathan Foust.
Welcome to One with Everything. This is a show that explores presence, transformation through curiosity and non-judging awareness. How do we do that? It's through interviews and experiences. We're going to have interviews with a spiritual practitioner, with a social activist, with a scientist, and with an artist. Over the years, I did some hard time in an ashram. And I've been teaching yoga and meditation for most of my life. And I'm really excited to be sharing these experiences and these inquiries with you. Swami Satchidananda, you may be familiar with him. He was the founder of Yogaville, one of the first teachers to come from India. And he had a very interesting statement once. He was asked by a reporter his opinion on a particular issue. And the reporter said, "What do you think of this as a Hindu?" And Swami Satchidananda said, "I don't think I'm a Hindu. I think I'm an undu." So I invite you to be an undu tonight. Undo your concepts, allow yourself to completely relax and enjoy whatever comes out. Let's hear it for Matt Oestreicher and the One with Everything Orchestra. Thank you so much. About a month ago, I came up to the Bijou Theater for a tech rehearsal, and they were playing a great song led by someone called Joe Gray. And Joe, thank you so much. You are amazing. You really, really are. After that rehearsal, as soon as I could, I grabbed Joe's hand and I said, "You are amazing." And Joe said, "No, we're amazing." And I thought, I like this guy.
What's not to like?
Exactly. What's not to like? So it's interesting how we tend to fixate on what doesn't work. You know, it's been said that the positive news is like Teflon and negative news is like Velcro. We tend to fixate on what's not right. If you ever had a cavity filled at the dentist, you know, your tongue keeps going back to that one little spot. So we'd like to focus on a different way of exploring our relationship to the news. We want to turn our attention to some of the good news out there. So our staff has been scouring the internet looking for some positive news for a segment that we're calling Acts of Kindness That Caught Our Attention This Week. Sometimes tragedies remind us that we're one family. And what if we could live this way all the time? In the aftermath of the hardship and tragedy, we often find ourselves really deeply in touch and touched by each other. And here's a great example. 87-year-old Patsy Roberts from Rockaway, Queens, was saving thousands of letters she received over her lifetime to read in her dying days. Those letters were all destroyed in Hurricane Sandy. When word got out about this, she received 12,000 letters from strangers as far away as India and the Philippines. She described it as the most wonderful experience she ever had. And when she received these letters, she said, "I don't have time to read all this crap." Actually, she said, "This is such a good feeling. You feel life is good after all." And sometimes people don't send letters, they actually send chocolate pies. So our next story is these chocolate pies were getting so popular in North Korea, they were ultimately banned as a sign of capitalism. Well, some South Koreans, maybe capitalists, were not happy about the fact that their neighbors couldn't enjoy these choco pies. The price of a single pie was costing up to $23, which was equal to a full day's work for someone in North Korea. So what they did is they sent these choco pies across the border. And you know, there's something about treating people kindly. It's another thing about treating people better than they think they deserve. This next story is about Charlie Todd of New York. It's a New York-based group called Improv Everywhere. And what they decided to do was to turn a little league game with 10-year-olds into a major league game. They brought in a scoreboard, NBC commentators, a jumbotron, they shipped in fans, and they even brought in a blimp.
Wow.
Check out this clip.
Can't wait to see that.
Coming in from out of the fog.
Well, Jim, you know it's a big game when the Goodyear blimp is here.
The Goodyear blimp, which travels hundreds of miles a year.
Look, the Goodyear
For
blimp.
sporting events around the country.
The Goodyear blimp has a special message for these fans. It says, "Go Mudcats, go Lugnuts. Welcome to the big leagues."
Mudcats, they've got their work cut out for them. Because you're going to have almost everything go right to pick up these 5 runs, Jonathan.
Absolutely. The Mudcats fans better put their rally caps back on because what we need here today is a rally.
This is what it's all about. You know, it truly made a difference in their lives. You know?
Imagine being 10 years old with a blimp.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Overhead
saying.
with your name on
Yeah,
it.
we got a blimp.
So this next story is going to ruin any excuse you could possibly have for ever working out. In Australia, a vegan couple in their 60s ran a marathon every single day of 2013.
Well, what's vegan?
So a vegan is someone who abstains from using any animal products whatsoever.
Any animal products?
So I was a vegan for quite a few years, and I explained this to my father. And he listened very carefully, and then he explained his philosophy to me. He said that he only ate animals that were vegetarians.
Wise man.
I actually went on to become a macrobiotic, which is only eating food that's available locally, in season, and of course no pesticides or anything like that. And I got very, very into it. So I was macrobiotic for about 5 years. And then I became macroneurotic for 2 more. And then, to be honest, I was a full-blown macropsychotic for about 1 more year. And then I just decided to be happy.
Yeah. That should have been your starting point all along.
So our final story is about a new perspective that really allows us to see who we are. How do we shift our perspective to where we sense that we're actually interconnected? There's one career field that allows you to see things from a different perspective, being an astronaut. It's a little hard to kind of break into it, but here's a quote from astronaut Frank Borman back in the 60s. He said, "When you're finally up at the moon, looking back on the Earth, all those differences and nationalistic traits are pretty well going to blend. And you're going to get a concept that maybe this is really one world. And why the hell can't we learn to live together like decent people?" So during a recent press conference, the crew of the ISS, a Russian and an American and a German astronaut who did the mission were asked, with everything that's going on in the Ukraine, with all the tension between the United States and Germany and Russia, how do you feel about it? How do you deal with it on that level? And here's their response. Take a look at this clip.
Well, I guess there's no politics in space.
Doesn't that completely change your state? Just to see that?
It certainly does.
I think it calls for a state change right now.
Why don't you give me a hug?
All right, yeah.
Yes, let's hug right. Yes.
It's about time.
Yeah.
It's about time.
Oh, yeah.
So take a moment and stand up and hug your neighbor.
Come on, everybody stand up.
Stand up, hug your neighbor. Anyone who's watching, hug your cactus, hug your goldfish. Take a moment just to hug something.
One more. Oh, what a great time.
Stay tuned for interviews with Krishna Das and Daryl Davis.
Our next guest is someone who lives from the heart, and in so doing, he has touched countless people. Krishna Das, or KD, is a bhakti yogi. His devotion comes through his chanting, through his bhajans, through who he is, and through his sense of humor. He's brought forth 12 CDs, one nominated for a Grammy. A film documentary was recently made, One Track Heart. Let's welcome Krishna Das. I wanted to share a story with you. Back when I lived in the ashram, Pilgrim Heart just came out, which I think was your second CD.
Yep.
And back then in the ashram, we had our own fleet of cars. We had 100 Toyota Tercels, the cheapest car you could possibly buy at that time. And in your CD, remember the Om Namah Shivaya,
Yeah,
the way that thing started off? I was walking down the back drive once. Every single car that went by was playing that song.
I'm big in Toyotas.
One thing that I've just observed over the years, when I think back to when I first met you, when I first heard your music, and I'm kind of shocked because I hear myself kind of saying, well, that was back in '84,
Yeah.
But so many experiences, so many practices, so many teachers, so many disciplines that you've tried on, certainly that I've tried on over the years. And we're getting older. What's it like to get old?
What? Well, this is only my 200,357th birth. So it's not that big a deal, And the crane I have next to the bed to get me up in the morning, it works beautifully.
It's all working.
Yeah. People look at you like you know something when you get old. That's kind of nice. Because you don't know anything. This is a television show, I can't hear you. It's interesting, as there's a line in one of the holy books in India by Tulsi Das, and it said, "Oh Lord, save me from the fever of youth." And if I think back to when I was youthful, it's kind of like having a fever, Just like everything's like out there and you're running around, you don't know what you're doing. Keep grabbing stuff and throwing it away and grabbing more stuff and trying stuff on, throwing it away, It's like having a fever. And now, when you get a little bit older, the fever goes down from 110 to maybe 104, and all of a sudden, life gets a little simpler in some ways. It's clearer. Your priorities kind of get more focused.
There's a great story of a Zen monk who was asked, what's it like to get older? And he said, it's like getting off a bucking bronco.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah.
So when you chant, when you actually go into that space with you're in a group of people, is there anything that's different now than it was 20 years ago?
Yeah, I find that as time goes on and the chanting keeps going on, I spend less and less time in heavier negative states of mind where I'm judging myself or giving myself a hard time or just moping around. I mope around less than I used to. I miss it. It's been home base for me my whole life, moping around, and now it's kind of gone. I was like, what do you do? So it's interesting. So that's kind of the way the chanting works, and all practices really. You keep doing them, and everything changes around the practice. everything gets lighter and clearer, and you spend less and less time being hard on yourself and hard on other people as well. So it's not that you feel like you know anything or that you're wise or you've ever learned anything. It's just that you spend less time giving yourself a hard time. And so your heart becomes more available. It's more available, it's out there. It's not so protected and so hidden and so scared.
Yeah, there's a program, a retreat that I've been leading for years, and someone said, what's different? And I found myself saying, it's a lot simpler. It's the same thing, but it's simpler.
Yeah, you're not looking at all the girls all the time. Just 90% of the time.
Yeah. There's a marked difference there.
Big difference, yeah.
So when you're in that space, I imagine there are times when you're chanting and there's a room full of people and there may be different mind states, different moods that you're in. What's the state like when you feel present? What's the actual internal experience like for you?
I don't know. I'm just being here. There's nobody taking notes at that time to tell you later, you know? And that's the idea. See, people think it's something you're supposed to know. Something's gonna happen and all of a sudden you'll be wearing a different set of clothes, you know, or something like that. Or you'll look in the mirror and there'll be somebody else there. But it's not like that. You're just not busy doing other things and being busy in your head. You're just present. When a kid's playing, a kid's just playing. They're not thinking, wow, I'm really just playing. And it's like that, you know? The evaluator, the judge, has just kind of gotten drunk and fallen asleep, and you're just here. And that's, it doesn't get measured, you know? When I'm chanting, people always ask me, what do you feel? And I said, how the hell do I know? I'm chanting. I'm not feeling, I'm chanting. What do you want, you know? So you know, once I was sitting with my guru once, and I was just telling this to Rudy, and I was sitting there, and I realized every time I sit with him, I was waiting for something to happen, for him to touch me on the head. And all of a sudden, I would be gone, right? And I'd be gone forever. And I realized I was waiting for that. And then I realized that if there is enlightenment, it's exactly the opposite of that. You're here, you're always going to be here. And you'll just be more and more here and less busy up there. And that's what happens as time goes on. You're more here, and less distracted, less anxious, less fearful, less shameful, less guilty, less selfish. You're just here. And that's what happens, you know. It was a big moment for me, you know. Because I saw that my programming as a Westerner trying to get something had laid all that neurosis on the spiritual stuff. It just doesn't belong there. It doesn't really fit, you know.
It's my sense that when that sense of I and mine falls away, something arises. And I just want to personally thank you for the willingness, not that you've really had any choice ever anyway, but the willingness to move into that space and to create a space for so many people to sense the mystery.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I do, really. And, you know, a lot of people thank me, and I had to learn how to say, you know, you're welcome. You know, it's not so easy. But I also have to say that the reason I started chanting with people is the same reason I chant today, and that's just to save my miserable ass. You know, day after day after day after day, that's what I'm doing. But I do have to admit, in all honesty, that the definition of my miserable ass has kind of widened a bit. But what can you do? It's going to happen.
Well, I'm excited to get your miserable ass back here for a second.
Okay, me too.
Thank you so much.
Okay, cool.
Thank you, Daryl Davis is many things. He's a musician, an author, an actor. I've read his book called Clandestine Relationships. He made a connection with some members of the Ku Klux Klan. And rather than turn away, he turned toward creating friendships. I'm so personally pleased to welcome Daryl Davis. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I have to confess, you made me cry.
Cry? How did you come all this way to make you cry?
I read your book, and it's not in my DNA very much to cry at things, but there are so many moments in your book that just struck me so deeply. The fact that you would pause and turn toward those who ostensibly were so filled with hatred toward you.
Well, you know, I gotta be honest with you. It wasn't so much courage as it was curiosity, because I couldn't quite get my head around, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? All you see is this. That's all you know about me, and yet you're gonna hate me.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you first came in contact and what that was like?
Oh my goodness. 1983, I got my degree in music, and I've been playing full-time ever since 1980. In 1983 in this country, country music had made a resurgence. So, you know, if you want to make a living playing music, which I did, you had to join a country band. So I joined this country band. I was the only black guy in the band, and consequently, usually the only black guy in many of the places where we went. So we played this truck stop in a place called Frederick, Maryland, called the Silver Dollar Lounge. And the Silver Dollar Lounge was an all-white lounge. And by that I mean, not that blacks were not allowed to go in there. Blacks did not go in there. And that was by their own choice. And that was usually a very good choice, because they were not welcome. So here I was in the Silver Dollar Lounge. And this white gentleman, he says, this is the first time I ever heard a black man play piano like Jerry Lee Lewis. Now, I was kind of taken aback. You know, I wasn't offended, but I was naive. And I said, where do you think Jerry Lee Lewis learned how to play? And he says, what are you talking about? But he wanted to buy me a drink. Now, I don't drink, but I agreed to go back to his table and have a cranberry juice. So I go back, the waitress brings my cranberry juice. The guy takes his glass and he clinks mine, cheers me, and he says, you know, this is the first time I ever sat down and had a drink with a black man. And I know that there are black people in Frederick, Maryland. I know that for a fact because I've seen them. So how did he miss them? And I asked him, I said, why? And he didn't answer me. I kept saying, why? And finally he just said, plain as day, I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan. Well, I burst out laughing because I didn't believe him. I know a lot about the Klan, and I did not believe him. So he went inside his pocket, put out his wallet, and handed me his Klan card. I looked at this thing. I recognized the Ku Klux Klan insignia, the red circle, the white cross, and red blood drop, and all this other stuff. I'm like, whoa, this thing is for real. So I stopped laughing at that point, right? And I gave it back, and now I'm wondering, why am I sitting here with a Klansman, right? So, but, you know, we talked about the Klan and some other things, and he gave me his phone number, and he wanted me to call him anytime I was to come back to the Silver Dollar Lounge, because he wanted to bring his buddies, you understand, to see this black guy play piano like Jerry Lee. And I would call him every 6 weeks on a Wednesday or a Thursday and say, hey man, I'm gonna be at the Silver Dollar, you know, Friday and Saturday, come on up. He'd come, and his Klansmen and Klanswomen would come, and they would gather around the bandstand and watch me play with the band. And then when I'd come off, some of them would want to meet me. Others were kind of standoffish, you know, didn't want to communicate with me, so they'd, you know, back away and watch me from afar. And this went on until the end of '83, at which time I quit the band and I went back to playing rock and roll and blues, and my degree is in jazz. So I lost contact with the Klan. It wasn't like, you know, I had a day off and I went to Frederick and hang out with the Klan, you know, so. But some years later, I decided I wanted to write a book, because I'd had a lot of, you know, racism experiences, and I thought, I'm gonna call that Klansman and get him to fix me up with the leader of the Klan. So this guy, Mr. Kelly, was the Grand Dragon of the state of Maryland. I wanted this guy that I met in the bar to fix me up with Mr. Kelly. And I contacted him, and he didn't want to do it. He liked me, but he was fearful that if he were to take a black man to this Grand Dragon, we'd both be in trouble. Well, I persuaded him to give me Mr. Kelly's home address and phone number. And he finally gave it to me after 20 minutes of my begging, on the condition that I not reveal to Mr. Kelly where I got it. I said, okay. And then I had my secretary call Mr. Kelly and set up an interview. I told her, do not tell him that I'm black. If he agrees to do the interview, he'll figure that out when he sees me. So we did this interview, and it went rather well. There was one little mishap. He came with his bodyguard, which is known as a Grand Nighthawk. And anybody who's prefixed with the word grand, that means state leader. Anybody who's prefixed with the word imperial means they are a national officer. So the Grand Nighthawk came with him, and the Grand Nighthawk was wearing military camouflage fatigues with the Ku Klux Klan blood drop emblem right here, the red circle, white cross, blood drop, KKK right here. On his beret, it said, embroidered, was Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And right here, he had a gun. And so I got up and I walked over, I put my hands out like this, like you can see I had nothing in my hands. I said, hi, Mr. Kelly, I'm Daryl Davis. He shook my hand. So far, so good. Nighthawk shook my hand, said, come on in, have a seat. So they sat down, and we got on with this interview. A little while later, there was kind of a strange noise, and we all jumped. And I flew out of my chair, because Mr. Kelly, if I'm sitting here and you're Mr. Kelly, I came up right out on the table, because I'm going to come across that table. I knew that Mr. Kelly had made this weird noise, and I perceived it to be an ominous, threatening noise. I didn't know what it was, but I knew that he made it because I didn't make it. I knew that he could read my eyes, because my eyes were speaking loud and clear. In fact, my eyes were shouting that he could hear my eyes. My eyes were asking him, what did you just do? And his eyes had locked with mine. And the Nighthawk, he was like this, looking at both of us like, what did either one of y'all just do, right? Well, Mary, my secretary, realized what happened. There was a bucket of ice and cans of soda sitting on the dresser. The ice in the bucket melted and the cans of soda shifted. And then it made that same noise again, and we all began laughing. The lesson taught is ignorance breeds fear. If you don't keep that fear in check, that fear will breed hatred. If you don't keep that hatred in check, that hatred will breed destruction, because we want to destroy those things that we hate. Why? Because they frighten us. But guess what? They may have been harmless and we were just ignorant. So that was the lesson that was taught that day, right? And then, like I said, we all laughed and we carried on the conversation. And I went around the country interviewing different Klan people, up north, down south, Midwest, West, etc. And I would keep in contact with those who would talk with me. Some refused to talk with me, all right? Over time, these people would begin questioning me, because at first, when I would interview them, they had no questions for me because I had nothing to offer them. I was inferior. They had all the answers, so they don't need to hear anything from me. So that, but over time, they began saying, so Daryl, what do you think about? I knew something had happened. All of a sudden, my opinion is of value to you? You want to know my opinion on what I think? And so that would expand the conversation. One thing that I learned, very important, is this. No matter what kind of opposition you have, it doesn't have to be about race, it could be about take race out of it. If you have an adversary, say you believe on one side of the abortion table, or the war in Iraq, or nuclear weapons, or the environment, whatever controversial subject is out there, let your opponent have a platform. Give him or her the opportunity to air their views, regardless of how extreme they may be. They may be so extreme it cut you to the bone. And believe me, I've been to some Klan rallies where I've heard things that have cut me to the bone, all right? But give that person a platform. If you go along with what they're saying, they convince you, then great, no problem. If they don't convince you, then say to them, look, give me a little more explanation. I need some more clarification as to why you think I should believe this way. And when you do things like that, there's a great chance that they will reciprocate and give you a platform to explain your point of view. You make sure you've done your homework, so you have all your facts together, and you can present your platform in an intelligent and influential manner. Because at the end of the day, you each have to think about what the other person said. If somebody says something to you that creates a little spark, you think, you know, she does have a point. You're going to begin to shift in that direction because nobody wants to be wrong. We all want to be right. So because I kept that line of communication open with Roger Kelly, he was the Grand Dragon of Maryland. A couple years later, you know, he told me he didn't like me, all right? But yet he would come down to my house. I would invite him down to my house. He would travel an hour and a half to my house with his Nighthawk, who would sit on my couch and twirl his gun on his finger while Mr. Kelly and I would talk. He would eat dinner at my table with me, even though he didn't like me. Okay, he was the Grand Dragon, head of the state of Maryland, Ku Klux Klan. After 2 years, he was promoted to national leader, Imperial Wizard, all right? He began inviting me to his house. I would go to his house, I would see his Klan den, where he would have his meetings. I'd take some more notes from my book. He invited me to Klan rallies. I'd go to these Klan rallies, watch them parade around in their robes and hoods and set this big cross on fire and proclaim white supremacy and white power and this, that, and the other. I'd take some more notes. But we kept those lines of communication open. And then a few years ago, Roger Kelly quit the Ku Klux Klan. Today, he no longer believes in what he preached. And when Mr. Kelly left the Klan, he gave me his robe and hood. Thank you. You don't make money being a Klan leader. You have to have a day job. This is only a title. His day job was Baltimore City police officer. He was not a undercover cop in the Klan. He was a Klansman on the police force, okay? And this is why you have a lot of tension between blacks and the police. There's a lot of history there, so I want to bring that up because that's very currently in the news.
This is a show about transformation. And I just want to express for myself, and I think on everyone here, to thank you for the courage.
But before you go, I'm sorry. I just like to say I'm very proud to be in your presence today, my brother. You've enlightened me as well as I know a lot of people in this audience who probably needed to know this as well as I do. You're just a courageous individual. I just want to tell you that.
I appreciate that very, very much. We are a very divided nation right now. And it pains me because we have the ability here in our country to put a man on the moon. How is it that we as Americans can talk to people as far away as the moon or anywhere on the face of this earth, but yet some of us have difficulty talking to the person who lives right next door to our house because he or she is a different color or religion or persuasion? Because folks, we are living in the 21st century. We are living in space-age times, but there's still too many of us still thinking with Stone Age minds.
Coming up, take a mind-body break with Beth and get ready for the meditation challenge.
So let's go ahead and close our eyes. Bring your hands together at your heart. And we'll take a big breath in. Feel the ribs widen. And as you breathe out, draw your hands together and your ribs will settle back in. Another big breath in. Feel the breath expand you from the inside. And then exhale. Draw in a little deeper. Feel your seat a little bit drawn down. And then one more big breath in. And breathe out through your mouth. Oh, that sounds so good. Let's do that 2 more times. Inhale. And exhale. Inhale. And exhale. And then just pause for a moment before you take another inhale. Keep your eyes closed. Just notice the spaciousness, the way it feels to feel empty and grounded at the same time. And then take a soft breath in. And breath out and open your eyes. And let's start to build something here. If you will. Make something burn. Build some heat. Maybe a little transformation might happen in the meantime. And as you're feeling the heat building between your hands, notice that if you keep your hands a little bit soft, you can move them better, right? If you keep them too tight and too taut, they don't move so well, right? So a little softness and a little energy and that balance, that effort and energy and softness, they work beautifully together. Okay, and then bring the hands to still. And bring your right hand to your heart and your left hand to your belly. Take a big breath into both hands. This is your front body, right there, loud and clear, right? And then lean into the back of your seat. Hands of the body will move away from your hands. Inhale into your hands. Exhale into your seat. So your front body represents your potential, your future. Keep going like this. And your back body, your past, memory, maybe subconscious. And right in between is your spine. And that's right now. That's present. So as you move forward and back into future and back through to past, notice what it feels like to transition and move through. And then find your way to center. Bring your hands now together with your right palm over your left. And then slide your hands away from each other just enough that you can hook your fingertips. And then pull the hands apart. Good. Lift your heart up into your hands or in line with them. And then you can't move so much in your seat, but just maybe rock a little side to side. So transformation happens when you decide to do it, right? Sometimes. And you kind of have to have some resistance, something to push up against. So pull, pull, pull here. Really create some resistance, some heat. And notice the sensation there. And then come to center. Just flip the palms. And do it on the other side. And notice there may be a little slight difference in your experience. So we tend to get a little right-handed or left-handed dominant. Your brain likes it when you switch it up, right? So switch it up. Good. And then release your hands. Take your palms together and reach them out in front of you, like you're directing your energy towards something specific. And then bring your arms up high. You may have to separate your palms, but keep them together if you can. Good. And then bring your hands back to your heart. Good. Reach your arms out in front of you. This is your inhale. Reach all the way up. And then your exhale will bring you back to center. Now this time, use your eyes. Engage as many of your senses as you can. So look at your hands as they reach up. Look at your hands as they reach up. And then keep your eyes on your thumbs as they descend down towards your heart. Let's do that one more time. Reach your arms out in front of you. Watch every movement that your body makes. Eyes follow the thumbs. All the way up. This is all of your inhale. And your exhale brings you back down. Just notice. And then interlace your hands with your right index finger on top. Flip your palms, press your hands away from you. You may notice a little slipping of your pinky fingers. See if you can keep as much of that there as possible, that connection. And then reach your arms high. Bend your right elbow. And then bend your left elbow. Ooh, nice. Inhale, reach your arms up. And go again, circling your right elbow. And back behind you. Say hello to your neighbor. Hello, neighbor. And then go the other direction. So circle back. And notice how delicious this can feel as you take your time and move around and feel the bones moving the joints and the muscles freeing up and saying, yes, I like this. Good. And then come back to center, reach the arms high, look up. And then watch your hands descend just in front of your heart. Flip your palms, press your palms together. Reach your arms high. And hands to your heart. Descending. take that other side. Flip your palms so now your other finger's on top. Lift your arms up. Big breath in. And then bend the elbows just 3 times. And so the left side bends first. And there's something nice about moving together, right? So as we're moving together and you're adapting to the movement around you, notice the quality of that. And then bring the arms back up and keep them there. Slide your hands away from each other. There. And then bring your hands back to your lap. Close your eyes. Come back to your feet. So drop your energy back down, as down as it can go. Notice how you feel. Gently open your eyes. Thank you. Namaste.
I'm going to give you an oversimplified version of how meditation has moved around the planet. When the Buddha had his awakening, he traveled by foot teaching, and so his teaching was kind of limited to northern India. But it was such a transformative practice that people told other people, and it followed the trade routes. And so it went down into southern India, down into the islands, and down into Southeast Asia, into the forests, where it became crystallized as the orthodox teachings, exactly how the Buddha taught them. It made its way to Nepal and Tibet, where it fused with the animistic culture. Then it made its way up into Japan, where it took on the flavor of Zen, and into Korea, where it took on that quality of inquiry or kensho. And the practice made its way to the West. And what did we do with it? Well, we sliced it, we diced it, we did double-blind studies, we did functional MRIs to find out exactly what happens to the brain when we try different techniques, what part of the brain lights up. And so what we have found is that this is an incredible practice. We know beyond a shadow of a doubt that it is transformative. I'd like to introduce you to someone who is on the very cutting edge of that cutting edge, Dr. David Vago. He's an instructor at Harvard Medical School. He's a fellow with the Mind Life Institute, and he's going to share with you a little bit about the technologies that can transform how you use your mind. David Vago.
As a scientist, we always have to ask questions, right? So, has anyone thought about what it means to be one with everything yet? There's one answer to this that I think comes from the great Master Dogen, who's a master, a Japanese Zen priest. And he said that the way to understand, to experience one with everything, is to study the self. And to study the self is to forget the self. And to forget the self is to be enlightened by all things. And to be enlightened by all things, here's the kicker here, is to dissolve the distinction between self and other. Now, how do we achieve that? We do that through meditation. The root of our suffering is based on our distorted perceptions of ourself. Distorted perceptions of ourself, of people around us, of the world, and our relations to the world. There was one study that was done about 2 years ago. It looked at 39,000 people. They surveyed them and asked them their perception of stress. And they followed them for 8 years and then matched those people through 8 years with death records. And they found that those people who said they experienced lots of stress in their life had a 43% increased risk in dying prematurely. But here's the other kicker to this story, is that it was those people who had lots of stress, but perceived that stress was bad for them, that actually died. Those people who had the same amount of stress, who reported having the same amount of stress, but did not perceive that stress actually influenced their health or well-being, those people had the healthiest profiles. Okay, so perception is key. So how do we remove some of these distortions of self-processing or relations to the world? And what are the technologies that we use to get there faster? Because we all want to get there faster. So we have a little experiment we're going to do today with a device that we can measure brain waves. I'm going to bring up 2 members of the audience, one who's a little bit more experienced meditator, and just to see if there's a way that they can experience a sense of calm a little bit more effectively than the other. We'll test them to see if they're able to maintain that calm through some distraction. Okay, you guys ready to do a little experiment?
Why, man? Who the man with the kite in the air?
My name is Jovina Chan, and I've been doing yoga since I was a kid, and love movement. I love to dance. I've been practicing meditation more seriously for the last 8 years.
My name is Sal. I'm a dad. I'm a yoga teacher. I'm CEO of a software company. And I sing some rock and roll from time to time.
Excellent. Excellent. All right.
Yeah, man. Who the man with the long, long hair? I'm Spider-Man. Yeah, man.
When you're ready, close your eyes, find a comfortable position, and allow your back to be straight. Take a moment to notice that you are breathing. Now, choose a place where you can clearly feel each breath. You might feel how your stomach expands and contracts, or you might be drawn to the rise and fall of your chest. Or maybe you can clearly sense air coming in and out of your nose. Once you've chosen a place, pay close attention to how each breath flows. Notice the brief moments of stillness between each inhale and exhale. For this session, do your best to keep your attention focused on how it feels to breathe in every moment, wherever you feel it most clearly. When the weather gets intense and you notice that your mind has wandered, try not to stress. See if you can simply return to the breath.
They don't know that Fabio is right behind me. I'm impressed with Sal over here. That he was 44% calm. The beginner was 48% calm.
Next, a musical performance by Krishna Das.
Our musical guests, Krishna Das and Arjun. thank you to Krishna Das and Arjun. A big thank you to all of our friends who came out tonight. Joe, Matt, Dr. David, Vago, and Daryl. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming. Have a wonderful night.